Could I, good evening, could I have your attention, please, for a second? We are planning to start momentarily. However, we're waiting for two of the candle lighters. So they are presently picked up at a parking lot, and once they are here, we will start. So just in case you wonder why we're not starting on time. So, thank you. Huh? Okay, I think all the candlelighters are here, so I'd like to ask you to take your seat. Yeah. So is the door closed? I have sorry. Okay, are we good? Okay. Good evening, everybody. For those who don't know me, my name is Werner Steger. I'm a professor here of history at Dutchess Community College. It's a privilege to welcome all of you to tonight's event. This event is also live streamed, and I want to welcome those who were not able to come and are watching on their screens or on their computers. Every year in my introductory remarks, I want to say that we reached a point when anti-Semitism and xenophobia lost or have lost momentum. And every year there is or seems to be plenty of evidence to the contrary. It's exactly 7 months ago today that Jews experienced the deadliest single day since the Holocaust. And it's impossible not to include what happened on October 7 of last year in this year's commemoration of the Shoah, and I think probably in the years to come. In today's Washington Post, an article appeared titled, "In an Israel Changed by October 7, Holocaust Survivors Find a New Mission." That's the title of the article. And we read the story of Hannah Goffrit, an 88-year-old Holocaust survivor from Poland who survived hiding in an underground potato shed as a child, comforting Israeli children who survived October 7, also hiding in safe rooms, in bushes, and even under dead bodies. I have always been a pessimist. For those of you who know me, I've always been sort of a pessimist regarding the staying power of anti-Semitism, but even for me, the professional pessimist, the spectacle of a Holocaust survivor comforting a survivor 4 generations later seemed unlikely, if not far-fetched. Yet here we are. I thought that we would never again be victims, Hannah Gottfried said in that article. She told the reporter that her role as an educator and survivor has changed over the past as she faced, quote-unquote, audiences that are thirsty for optimism. But optimism is hard to come by. Israel is home to 133,000 Holocaust survivors, and they are not safe unless Israel wins this struggle. So far, 2,000 of them had to be evacuated from their homes because of the war in Gaza. There may be more. On April 16 of this year, the Anti-Defamation League released its annual audit for 2023. It recorded 8,873 anti-Semitic incidents in the United States for that year, a 140% increase over 2022. Much of the increase came after Hamas's massacre of October 7. So instead of recoiling in horror and soul-searching at what happened on October 7, we witnessed an increase in anti-Semitic incidents. Considering what we have witnessed in the last 4 months, I'm sort of terrified to contemplate the ADL's audit for 2024, which will come out next April. Philip Gurevich, in his book on the Rwandan genocide, wrote that what distinguished genocide from ordinary or political violence is the intent. He writes, "The crime is wanting to make a people extinct. The idea is the crime." And as October 7 has shown, this idea is alive and not just in the Middle East. Tonight's event is an important reminder where intolerance and xenophobia can lead if followed through to its perversely logical end. I would like to thank the Jewish Federation of Dutchess County and Dutchess Community College for collaborating on tonight's ceremony. Thanks goes to the Yom HaShoah Committee, which consisted of Rabbi Rennie Altman, Cantor Devorah Gartner, Jeff Gross, Muriel Horowitz, Karen Hochhauser, Pam and Michael Smith, and Paula Reckes. A very special thanks goes to committee member Paula Reckes for once again sponsoring a reception in the Ritz Lounge following this event. This will be across the hall. And of course, the students of the Kulano Youth Group who will participate in tonight's event. And I would like also to extend a special welcome to Dr. Peter Jordan, president of Dutchess Community College, who is here with us tonight, and thank him for his support so we can continue to hold this event here at DCC. Holocaust and Heroism Remembrance Day, known colloquially in Israel and abroad as Yom HaShoah, started Sunday night, last Sunday night, 2 days ago, and lasted until last night. Yom HaShoah was inaugurated in 1953 as an official holiday in Israel, but has been since observed the world over. There is not a precise blueprint for the ceremony, though the lighting of memorial candles and the recital of the Kaddish, the prayer for the departed, are the most common features. Yom HaShoah is always scheduled during the week following the end of the Passover holiday, in remembrance of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which took place during Passover in 1943. So on this day, we remember the victims, those who perished in the cataclysm of violence unleashed by the Nazis against Europe's Jews. We honor the survivors who bore witness and whose stories embody important lessons for future generations. And we remember heroism and resistance. But the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising also coincided with the so-called Bermuda Conference, when in 1943, high-ranking American and British officials met in Bermuda to discuss the quote-unquote refugee situation, at a time when there were no more Jewish refugees and the majority of Polish, Baltic, and Ukrainian Jews had already been murdered. On April 19, 1943, the day the conference opened, a secret radio transmitting from German-occupied Warsaw sent the following message, and I quote, "The last 35,000 Jews in the ghetto at Warsaw have been condemned to execution. Warsaw is again echoing to volleys of musketry. The people are being murdered. Women and children defend themselves with naked arms. Save us." End of quote. Nobody did. The Jewish Frontier, a labor Zionist journal trying to make sense of the uprising, and the Bermuda Conference wrote in the aftermath, quote, "The Warsaw Ghetto has been liquidated. Leaders of the Polish Jewry are dead by their own hand, and the world, which looks on passively, is, in its way, dead too." End of quote. So it's impossible not to notice parallels of how the world reacted to October 7, I think. So at this point, I would like to call on Rabbi John Haddon from Congregation Beth David for the Bird Song.
Dear friends, the following poem recalls the lives of 1.5 million children who perished between 1938 and 1945. The words are, "Who stays in his nest and doesn't go out. He doesn't know what birds know best, nor what I want to sing about. That the world is full of loveliness. When dewdrops sparkle in the grass, and earth's aflood with morning light, a blackbird sings upon a bush to greet the dawning after night. Then I know how fine it is to be alive." He doesn't know the world at all, who stays in his nest and won't come out. He doesn't know what birds know best, nor what I want to sing about. What I want to sing about. What I want to sing about. What I want to sing about is that the world is full of loveliness. When dewdrops sparkle in the grass, and earth's aflood with morning dew, a blackbird sings upon a bush to greet the dawning after night, to greet the dawning after night, to greet the dawning after night, to greet the dawning after night. Then I know how good it is to be alive. Open up your heart to beauty and go to the woods someday and weave a wreath of memories there. And if the tears obscure your way, 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 you will know how good it is just to be alive.
I'm going to call on Cantor Devorah Gardner, Temple Beth El, for the introduction to the lighting of the memorial candles.
These 6 memorial candles represent the 6 million Jews who perished in the Shoah. Today, we find ourselves at the crossroads of history. We are the last generation to be personally acquainted with Holocaust survivors. We hold the great responsibility to bear witness, to ensure that what we have seen, what we have heard, and what we have learned is passed on to future generations. Each of the 6 candle lighters will share for whom their candle is lit.
The first candle will be lit by Bethany Gardner.
I light this candle in memory of my great-great-uncles Aaron and Isidore, and my great-great-aunt Meta. Despite the horrors they survived and the numbers on their arms, they never failed to embrace life and family as a joyous gift.
The second candle is lit by Ralph Price.
I light this candle in memory of my grandmother left in Germany and my uncle and aunt who were caught in Paris by the Nazis or by the French police, turned over to the Nazis, and then my cousins who were also somehow caught. Their home in Paris was left all by itself. We visited it after the war. It was there just as is, and we took their photo albums and sold the rest.
The third candle will be lit by David Reckes.
I light this candle in memory of my grandparents and their families, members of the Feldzeman, Tuller, Reches, and Gozek families.
The fourth candle will be lit by Marlene Strauss.
I light this candle in memory of the 6 million and in hopes that in their memory we somehow find the strength to carry on and find justice in this world.
The fifth candle will be lit by Jakob Weintraub.
I light this candle in memory of my mother's parents, Bela Lisser, Shimshon Gersh, my father's parents, Rivka Traub, Yaakov Weintraub. There are many siblings that I never met, my cousins that I never met. But this Pesach, me and my siblings were together, and their children, and their children's children, my parents' great-grandchildren, some, so we have joy still in life.
The sixth candle will be lit by Miriam Simit Aaron.
I light this candle in memory of my paternal grandparents, whom I never met. They died in Auschwitz in August 1943, and also in memory of Paul and Marta Zimmet.
A candle in the memory of the righteous Gentiles will be lighted by Bishop Deborah E. Gauss, Holy Light Pentecostal Church of Poughkeepsie.
I light this candle in memory of the righteous Gentiles who placed their own lives in danger for the sake of our persecuted and tortured Jewish brothers and sisters during the Holocaust. They were shining stars in the overwhelming darkness of evil. They spoke out at a time of silence. They offered sanctuary and a lease on life in the eye of the murderous storm. People of faith and conscience in the very valley of the shadow of death, these men and women saved the few and the many. Were there were no human beings, they were human. We honor their memory.
This will conclude the candle lighting ceremony. I'd like to call now on Tamar Hyman Fessler from the Kulano Youth Group, who will read excerpts from second-generation survivors.
After experiencing the atrocities of the Holocaust, it is hard to believe that anyone would have the capability to live their life normally afterwards. For the Jews who survived, many decided right away that it was their duty to continue their family's legacy. While these legacies continued, the stories of survivors during the war, the children of these survivors continued to be impacted by their parents' experiences to this day. The children of the Holocaust survivors, also known as second-generation survivors, have been found to be heavily influenced by their parents' experiences of the Shoah. Straight out of war, survivors often became traumatized parents. Survivors wondered what would be safest for their children after living through the Holocaust. Was it best for them to live in a Jewish or Gentile neighborhood, to become well-known in society, or hide and never be seen? Questions emerged from a common fear that the next generation might face the horrors of genocide just as their parents did. It's still uncertain how second-generation survivors will impact the third generation and the future beyond. By learning about the Holocaust, specifically how relationships were affected among survivors and their children, our eyes are opened to the idea that by teaching one another about our past, we not only can form stronger bonds among our family members, but also find ways of healing collectively as a Jewish people.
Next up, Amalia Parsons and Livia Ritz, also from the Kulano Youth Group, who will read excerpts from how trauma suffered by Holocaust survivors has affected the next generation.
Marilyn Sinclair's father, Ernie Weiss, was a Holocaust survivor. I would always ask my father, "What did you dream about last night? What was your nightmare?" And he'd always say, "Oh, I don't ever remember my dreams. I'm sorry I woke you." It was only many years later that Sinclair's father told her his nightmares were set in Auschwitz, where he was a prisoner there. The revelation seriously affected Sinclair, who said she herself has nightmares. What happens when you're a child of somebody who has experienced such tremendous trauma is that those memories become yours, she said. Children of Holocaust survivors actually live with memories of events that never happened to them, which is really unusual, but you absorb those memories as if you lived through the trauma.
Sinclair also said that growing up, she tried hard to do her part to be happy around her father, to never complain about anything, and to always try and be grateful. It was a very unusual situation. We knew, even if they didn't tell us the stories, we knew something terrible had happened to them, and we wanted to protect them. Sinclair credits her childhood as being a huge part of why she's devoted much of her life to Holocaust education. "I probably think about the Holocaust in one way or another every single day," she said. "So I've just made it my goal to try and teach as many people as possible about the Holocaust, particularly students."
Next is Penelope Hirschfield from the Kulano Youth Group. She will read excerpts from how being a third-generation Holocaust survivor inspired my journey to social justice.
I had my moment of realization the moment when I realized that being a third-generation Holocaust survivor was bigger than just carrying the story of my family. For me, being a third-generation survivor meant taking a stand against injustice everywhere. I realized that while I couldn't go back in time and change what happened to my family during the Holocaust, I could work to ensure that people around the world today experience dignity and safety, no matter their race, gender, sexual orientation, sexual identity, or religion. I could honor the legacy of my grandfather and the rest of his family and the 6 million others who perished in the Holocaust by working to help access their human rights. I'm so proud to work for an organization that allows me to do that work, to stand up for the rights of women and girls, to live free of violence, to work to end hate crimes against LGBTQ people, to support indigenous people who are fighting for their right to land and water, to help end early child marriage. Holocaust survivor and author Elie Wiesel once said, "There may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never be a time that we fail to protest."
Next up is Ezra Van Doddik, also from the Kulano Youth Group, who will read excerpts from How Trauma Suffered by Holocaust Survivors Has Affected the Next Generation.
Willie Handler didn't know much about his parents' experiences during the war, except that they were both survivors. It was a difficult upbringing. Then he started researching about his family history. He found out that his father had lost his wife and both their children. His father was so traumatized by his experiences, he had blocked out the fact that he'd even had 2 children. Handler said that his own childhood was affected by the traumas of his parents and the tension in his house, but also by loneliness, since most of their extended families had been lost in the war. He recalls milestones and holidays being very quiet. In his own life, he thinks the sadness he absorbed also caused him to be more solitary as well. One of my weaknesses was that I didn't like to take a lot of credit for things, and I'm positive that is passed down from my dad. In the camps, one of the things that you didn't want to do was draw attention to yourself. You just wanted to blend in, he explains. To compensate for his childhood, Handler is very involved as a grandparent and tries to make his own grandsons a big priority. I want to give them happy memories with a joyful family life.
It is now my pleasure to introduce this evening's keynote speaker, David Reckes. Dave Reckes, the grandson of 4 Holocaust survivors from Poland and Russia, has been the executive director of 3GNY since March 2021. He was trained as an elementary school teacher, and he has an extensive background in education, management, and nonprofit leadership. Dave holds a BA in religion from Amherst College and a master's in childhood education from SUNY Cortland. Raised in Poughkeepsie, New York, he now lives with his wife and 2 kids on a small farm outside of Syracuse, New York. Dave is honored to lead 3GNY, support 3Gs in learning to tell their family stories through 3GNY's WEDU program, and help others find meaning and connection as descendants of Holocaust survivors. And I also want to add that Dave is the son of very 2 dear friends of mine, and the grandson of Sarah. May her memory be for a blessing. David.
Good evening. Thank you all. Thank you to Dutchess Community College for hosting us, and to the Dutchess County Federation for sponsoring this program. And thank you, Werner, for that introduction. I have to say that I had heard for many years about you and how you taught my grandmother's memoir in your class, and the gratitude that my grandmother and my mother felt for you, and the care, sincerity, and sensitivity that you brought to her story. When I speak in schools, I always tell students that my booby, my grandmother, made everyone feel like they had a special relationship with her. And I think the first time that I met you, Werner, may have been at her Shiva, and I was struck by how you have that same quality. And it was clear that you made her and my whole family, and I assume your many students, know that we have a special bond with you. So thank you. I'm really honored to be here tonight to commemorate Yom HaShoah with all of you, and to be invited to speak about keeping the memories alive. Holocaust remembrance and education often focuses on memory, our responsibility to never forget. It's an unquestionable imperative. We must remember, so that we can ensure that never again will we allow something like the Holocaust to happen to Jews or to anyone else. This past year has been difficult, to say the least. For many of us, our understanding of memory, our understanding of the Holocaust, of anti-Semitism, of Jewish identity, of Israel, has been challenged and may feel different now. Tonight, I hope to share a little bit about my grandmother and about the power of memory. And I invite you to think about your own personal and our collective memories. Yom HaShoah creates a ritualized space for us to dwell in the memories of the Holocaust. And I encourage you to use this space to also consider what our memories demand of us. What obligations do they create for us as Jews, as neighbors, as humans? I learned a lot about the Holocaust and its lessons from my grandmother, my Bubi Sarah. And many of you in the audience knew my grandmother too. There she is. I love showing this picture when I introduce her to students because it shows just how tiny she was. But I also emphasize that though she was small in stature physically, she was huge in spirit. And that she was fun, she was social, she loved playing cards, telling stories, and she was a killer dancer. And I tell everyone about that special relationship that she made everybody feel like they had, including some of you in this room who get name-dropped whenever I talk to students as my high school friends who would come over not to hang out with my Bubi, but just with Bubi. We called her everybody's Bubi. And shortly before she passed away in early 2020, she came to visit me and my family in upstate New York. The previous day, she had been here in Dutchess County, presenting to a group of 4th and 5th graders. And when she got to my home outside of Syracuse, she couldn't contain her enthusiasm. She was so impressed at the students' attention, at the questions that they asked, and at how much they could connect and relate to her and her story. The next year, after Bubi had passed away, my son Owen was in 7th grade, and he started studying the Holocaust in class. All of a sudden, I realized that Bubi was no longer here to share her stories with him and his classmates. I realized that now that was my responsibility. Fortunately, soon afterwards, I found out about 3GNY and our We Do class that trains grandchildren of survivors to share their family stories. I signed up right away, first as a volunteer, and then soon afterwards, I was and still am grateful and honored to step into my role as executive director. 3GNY is an educational organization founded by grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. And when I share in schools, I explain the term 3GNY. Students understand the NY part because we're in New York. But I let them know what 3G means and the significance that the people who survived the Holocaust, who witnessed firsthand the atrocities and the horrors that students are studying about, they are the survivors, the first generation. Their children, my parents, the second generation, which makes me and other grandchildren like me the third generation. I tell students that we, as 3Gs, many of us feel so strongly about our role as the inheritors of Holocaust memory that there are hundreds of us who volunteer and dedicate our time and energy to sharing our memories with students, basically strangers, in the hopes that our memories will be instructive as the students build their own sense of self, of identity, and of their role and place in the world. So if we're going to talk about memory, I think it's helpful to think about what memory is. The late Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, the former chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, wrote that, quote, "Memory is different from history. History is someone else's story. It's about events that occurred long ago to someone else. Memory is my story. It's about where I come from and of what narrative I am a part. History answers the question, what happened? Memory answers the question, who then am I? It is about identity and the connection between the generations. In the case of collective memory, all depends on how we tell the story. End quote. Now, I often refer to our 3GNY volunteers as the stewards of memory. In our We Do training, which is short for We Educate, we teach 3Gs to compellingly share their family stories. And one of the points that we emphasize is that our role is not to teach the history of the Holocaust. There are plenty of curriculum resources out there that help teachers do that very well. Rather, the unique role that we play, and only we can fill, is to share our memory of the Holocaust, the stories that impacted us as human beings, the way our family history informs who we are today, and how we navigate the world. Now, many of us, as 3Gs, heard our grandparents' stories directly from them, or from videos of them, or from their writing. Personally, I had the benefit of all three. Others learned about it secondhand from our parents and other relatives. And still others never had that opportunity and have had to dig through archives and records, interpreting lists and identity cards, reading between the lines of a stolen history to grab hold of the memories. Yet however we came to the stories, as the grandchildren of survivors, we are a living link to the memories from our family's past. And as such, we cannot simply tell the story as we heard it. We must place ourselves squarely in the narrative, helping our audiences understand that these memories are an essential part of who we are. And if we tell our stories well, our memories can become an important part of our audience's understanding of who they are, too. We can help them think critically about their individual and collective role in standing up to anti-Semitism and hatred, and acting with courage and compassion. In his book, Witness, Lessons from Elie Wiesel's Classroom, Rabbi Dr. Ariel Berger recounts key teachings that he learned as Elie Wiesel's longtime student, friend, and teaching assistant. Dr. Berger describes Elie Wiesel wrestling to understand the purpose of learning and knowledge, with his acute awareness that the Holocaust itself was orchestrated and perpetrated by Nazi Party leaders who, in many cases, were members of the well-educated and highly cultured German elite. Wiesel recognized that knowledge alone does not guarantee moral and ethical behavior. And as Dr. Berger tells it, he sought to identify what it was that, quote, could fulfill education's promise to protect against moral and ethical corruption. Professor Wiesel's life as a teacher became a quest for this element that would ensure that knowledge became a blessing and not a curse, that its accumulation would lead to compassionate behavior and not its opposite, end quote. This essential element, Elie Wiesel determined, was memory. So with this in mind, I'd like to share with you a snippet of memory that I often share with students when I visit their classrooms to tell them about Bubi Sarah. So by this point in my talk with students, I've introduced them to Bubi, I've told them about her life, her childhood. I share this picture, which was taken after the war, but it's one of the earliest pictures I have seen of her. And I like picturing her as a young woman in her late teens and early 20s during that time period. And I've told them about the start of the war when she was 16, about the living conditions in the Lublin ghetto before Bubi Sarah and others were moved to Majdanek, the town, and forced to build the concentration camp there. So now, I'd like to bring you to the fall of 1941. Construction of the Majdanek concentration camp is nearly complete. Bubi Sarah is 19 years old. Early one morning, the Nazis pulled all of the Jews out of their homes and into the village square. Bubi Sarah was there with her mom and her dad, and her younger brother, who was 17, her cousins were there. Her boyfriend Yehuda was there, and he came out of his house carrying his own mother in his arms because she had recently broken her leg and couldn't walk. And he knew that if he left her in the apartment, she would be killed immediately. Hundreds of other Jews were with them as well. The Nazis marched them all at gunpoint to the outskirts of the village and in through the gate in the concentration camp's barbed wire fence. Bubi Sarah told me that she heard the gate slam shut behind her and the locks click into place. She felt numb, cold. They were all marched into a building and crammed into two massive rooms similar to the one in the top left there. And they were left to wait. And it wasn't until years later that Bubi Sarah realized that these were the Maidanic gas chambers where tens of thousands of Jews would later be murdered. Around 3 o'clock that afternoon, her boyfriend Yehuda brought Bubi Sarah a small piece of bread that he had found while he was walking around and a small bit of news. He had been talking to one of the guards at the outskirts of the room, and the guard had said that night at midnight, he was going to open the gate that he was in charge of. He would pretend to look away, and anyone who wanted to could try to escape. Now, what possessed this guard to offer this chance, to risk his own safety and open the gate? I have no idea. I don't know if it was compassion. I don't know if it was pity. I don't know if it was something else. But after 3 minutes, the guard said, he would close the gate and release his 7 guard dogs to go chase down anyone who had fled. He told Yehuda that anyone who stayed behind in the camp would most certainly be dead soon. So his advice to Yehuda was, verschwinden, disappear. When Bubi Sarah heard this, she looked at her family, and they debated whether they should try to run. Her father was adamant. He said, I am not going to just sit here and wait to die. We're going. And her mother agreed, and her younger brother couldn't imagine separating from his parents. So he said, yes, we have to go. Only Bubi Sarah was unsure. By this point, I'm sure she was tired. I think she was weak. She hadn't been eating very much. I think she was scared. She looked to Yehuda, her boyfriend. What do you think? Should we go? But Yehuda had already made up his mind. I can't. My mother can't run. She needs me here. But you, Sarah, you have to try. Imagine having to make a choice like that. I don't know what I would do. I know that my Bubi really loved Yehuda. She told me that towards the end of her life. But she knew that she needed to be with her family and that this was their best chance at surviving. And so they decided that the 4 of them would run. They would split up as soon as they made their way through the gate, and they knew of a Polish Catholic family who lived in the village nearby who had been friendly to them before, and they thought maybe this family would help them now. They would have several hours under the cover of darkness to make their way to this home through unfamiliar woods, and once there, they could regroup and figure out what to do next. Once their plan was set, Bubi Sarah's aunt approached them, holding her 5-year-old son on her hip. I can't run. There's no way I'll make it. But you will survive. You have to take my young Yosele with you. Bubi and her family again debated what to do. Could they take him with them? Could they keep him quiet as they ran through the woods? They knew that if they left Yosele behind, he would likely be killed. But if they took him with them, they realized, it would surely spell capture and death for them all. I sometimes wonder what I would have done, but it's an impossible question. There are no good answers. They told Aunt Mira that no, they could not take her son. As hard as it was, this was the only way they would have any chance of escape. Many years later, towards the end of Bubi Sarah's life, she would often tell me that she kept waking up and seeing young Yosele's face in her dreams. She couldn't shake the feeling of turning her back on him, even knowing that it was the only decision that they could have made. As nighttime fell, that big room grew quiet, and complete darkness took over. Bubby spent those hours huddled close with Yehuda, hugging, kissing, saying their goodbyes. And at midnight, true to his word, the guard opened the door. "Good luck," he said, and then he turned away. Bubby Sarah felt the crowd surge past her towards the gate, and she felt chaos. She lost track of her parents and her brother right away, and she felt hands on her back and looked behind and saw Yehuda pushing her away from him, but out towards a chance at freedom. In the rush, she was separated from her parents and her brother, and she ran through the gate, and she told me later that she heard the barking of the dogs, and all she could think was that she would rather be killed by a bullet than torn apart by the dog's jaws. So she closed her eyes, she put her head down, and she just ran straight out into the woods, into the night. As morning was breaking, Bubby Sarah made it to the Catholic family's house. And she was relieved to find that her parents and her brother had made it there ahead of her, and that the family had said, "Yes, come in, we will help you." And they gave them food and clean clothes, and said, "You can stay, but only for a day or two, because it is too dangerous for you and for us for you to be here longer." I don't know much about this family. I don't know their name. I don't know who they were. I don't know the village they lived in. I don't know why they chose to risk their lives to help some refugee Jews escape, when so many other Polish people did nothing. But one thing I do know, deep in my heart, is that without their help, Bubby Sarah and her family wouldn't have made it, and I wouldn't be here speaking with you tonight. Bubby often talked later in life about how her outlook changed after escaping from Majdanek. So many others would never make it out, not her young cousin Yosele, not her boyfriend Yehuda, who had literally pushed her out of the camp. She felt that she had been given an extraordinary chance to stay alive, and that filled her with hope. It filled her with the will to go on, to fight for her life, to make sure that her survival was worth it. Now, when I'm sharing this in a classroom, I go on then to describe how Bubby Sarah survived the following 3.5 years in hiding in a small apartment in Warsaw. I talk about the process of liberation, of returning to Lublin, meeting my grandfather, and moving to New York to build a new life and family. Yet at the end of my talks, in almost every instance, students' questions come back to Majdanek. They want to know more about that guard, who he was, why he helped. Did Bubby or have I ever found him? They ask about Yehuda, Bubby's boyfriend, and what happened to him, what happened to his mother. They wonder aloud about the Catholic family who helped Bubby and her parents escape. And I see them wrestling to make sense of these events, not as historians, but as individuals, as teenagers, as humans. Dr. Berger wrote that, quote, "At the heart of Elie Wiesel's mission as a teacher was a phrase his students heard him repeat again and again: listening to a witness makes you a witness. Like propaganda, its evil twin, moral education is contagious. When moral education works, students investigate and embrace new ways of thinking, learn new habits of questioning, and ultimately find a deeper sense of common humanity. Students who experience this become sensitized to suffering. They read the news differently. Inaction is no longer an option. In order to transform," Berger goes on, "moral education must entail more than a transactional exchange of information. People are morally ignited less by the cognitive process of learning information than by visceral experience, less by the intellect than by the nervous system. Moments of gooseflesh, chills up the spine, the welling up of tears. This is the only way a student can become a witness," end quote. When students approach me after a presentation, to ask more about Bubi's escape from Majdanek, sometimes to share with me the stories they've heard from their own grandparents, or even just to grab an extra moment of personal connection. I know that they are becoming witnesses to the Shoah. This is my why. It's the answer for me and for so many of 3GNY's volunteers as to why we must keep the memories alive. Our memories demand that we bear witness, and in many cases, as the last living link to have heard these stories firsthand, that we invite others to become witnesses alongside us. In this moment we are in today, right now, in the aftermath of October 7th, with the rise in anti-Semitism locally and globally, on the heels of years of normalized Holocaust distortion, denial, and dismissal, keeping the memories alive feels more urgent than ever. Our world is crying out with a desperate need for more empathy, more understanding, more respect for our neighbors, reminders of the dignity of each human being. This is why we must continue telling our stories, sharing our memories as the Jewish people. Because, to close with one final message from Elie Wiesel, if even one person learns from it how to be more human, you will have made your memories into a blessing. So thank you for this opportunity to share my memories with you tonight.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much, and particularly for your very kind words at the beginning of your talk. This is something probably my own mother wouldn't believe, but it's... Now I'd like to call on Bethany Gardner, advisor of the Kulano Youth Group, who will read excerpts from Second Generation.
The man who almost wasn't sits down at the table. The woman who barely made it serves him plum cake. This is my home. It is good here, safe. Mother leans on father. Father leans on shadow. At night, they tiptoe into my room in beekeeper suits, rub my temples with wax. We are a very warm family. The floor burns under our feet. We believe in walls, believe less in a roof. It has to be built every morning anew. We build. There is ammunition in the medicine cabinet and a bribe in the bank for the guard who lets us steal across the border every night. Silence is the pitch that stops up gaps, seals the floors. I hear something deep, roaring and surging. There's a sea underneath the foundations of home.
I'm going to announce the next 4 presentations. First, for Yizkor in Hebrew, Rabbi Michael Fessler from Temple Beth El. Yizkor in English, Rabbi Rennie Altman from Vassar Temple, followed by El Malay Rachamim for the 6 million in Hebrew by Rabbi Miriam Hyman, Temple Beth El, and El Malay Rachamim for the 6 million in English by Rabbi Rennie Altman.
יזכור אלוהים את נשמות כל אחינו בני ישראל שמסרו את נפשם על קידוש השם ואת הנשים, נשים וטף שנחנקו ושנשרפו ושנהרגו בשואה. בעבור שאנו מתפללים בעד הזכרת נשמתם, אנו יישמע בחיינו הד גבורתם ומסירותם ויראה במעשינו טוהר ליבם. ותהיינה נפשותיהם צורות בצרור החיים, ותהי מנוחתם כבוד, סובה שמחות את פניך, נעימות בימיניך, נצח, אמן.
May God remember the martyrs of our people who gave their lives for the sanctification of God's name, and the men, women, and children who were slaughtered, burned, and killed in the Holocaust. In their memory we pray. May our lives reflect a measure of their bravery, dedication, and purity of soul. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life. May they be remembered with honor, and may they rest in peace at your right hand. And to this we say, Amen.
Please rise for the memorial prayer if you're able to. El male rachamim, shochen bamromim, hamse menucha nechona, tachat kanvei hashechina, b'malot kedoshim uteorim, kezoar harakia masirim, et nishmot kol achinu b'nei Yisrael, Anashim, Nashim, V'tav, Shenitbechu, V'shenechneku, V'shenisrefu, V'shenergu, Began Eden Tehi Menuchatam, Anabal Harachamim, Hastirehim beseter kenafecha leolamim, utzor b'tzorchaim et nishmotehem, Adonai unachalatam, ve'yanuchu v'shalom al mishkevotehem, v'nomar amen.
Please join with me. Exalted, compassionate God, grant permanent rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the souls of all our brethren who perished in the Shoah, men, women, and children of the house of Israel who were slaughtered, suffocated, and burned to ashes. May their memory endure and inspire deeds of charity and goodness in our lives. May their souls thus be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May they rest in peace, and let us say, Amen.
I'd like to call on Rabbi Glenn Jacob, Congregation Shir Hadash, to lead us in Kaddish of Remembrance.
Please join me. Yitgadal, Auschwitz. Yitgadash, Shemei Rabbah. Valma div rachirute. Vayimloch malchute. Vachayachon v'meachon. Uvchayedochu Beit Yisrael. Ubagalau zman kariv. V'yimaru amen. Yehesh meira ba merach leolam me amaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitumam v'yitkadshe v'yithadal yitale v'yitalal shemeir kudisha b'reichu ve'ala min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechemata ta'aman ba'amah V'imru, Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. Ose Shalom B'rumav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom, Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen.
This year, the legacy will be read by the Kulanu Youth Group.
take this oath. We take it in the shadow of flames whose tongues sear the souls of our people. We vow in the names of our dead grandparents, parents, and children. We vow with our sadness hidden, our faith renewed. We take this oath. Vision becomes word, to be handed down from father to son, from mother to daughter, from generation to generation. Remember what the Nazi killers and their accomplices did to our people. Remember what an indifferent world did to us and to itself. Remember the victims with pride and with sorrow. We shall also remember the miracle of the Jewish rebirth in the land of our ancestors, in the independent state of Israel. Here, pioneers and fighters returned to our people the dignity and majesty of nationhood. To the end of our days, we shall remember all those who realized and raised their dream, our dream of redemption to the loftiest heights. Also remember the deeds of the righteous Gentiles. We take this oath today. Let our legacy endure as the stone of the temple wall in Jerusalem, where our prayers and memories burn. They burn and will not be consumed.
We read together. Please rise. We accept the obligation of legacy. We are the generations born after the darkness. Through our parents' and grandparents' memories, words and silence, we are linked to that annihilated Jewish existence whose echoes permeate our consciousness. We dedicate this pledge to you, our families and friends, who suffered and survived, to our grandparents, to all those who perished in flames, to our vanished brothers and sisters, more than 1 million Jewish children so brutally murdered, to all 6 million who have unyielding spiritual and physical resistance, even in the camps and ghettos, exemplifies our people's commitment to life. We pledge to remember. We shall teach our children to preserve forever that uprooted Jewish spirit which cannot be destroyed. We shall tell the world of the depths to which humanity can sink and the heights which bring it even in hell itself. We shall fight anti-Semitism and all forms of racial hatred by our dedication to freedom throughout the world. We affirm our commitment to the state of Israel and to the furtherance of Jewish life in our homeland. We pledge ourselves to the oneness of the Jewish people. We are your children. We are here.
This concludes this year's community commemoration. I would like to invite you to join us across the hall for some refreshments and And thank you for coming out to this very important and, as always, moving event. Thank you.